going to be the second part of cellular respiration, and this one's going to be all about aerobic respiration. And aerobic respiration is when oxygen is present. Okay, so this is the most efficient, okay, most preferred, all right, and most organisms are going to die if they don't have oxygen. And this one is going to give you 38 total ATP. It's going to require the use of 2 ATP. Okay, and then in the end you get 36. Okay, so this is net and this is gross. Okay, so this is your paycheck, this is taxes, this is what you bring home. Okay, so this is the way that the mitochondria, that you've learned, the mighty mitochondria, the powerhouse, this is actually what it's doing. Okay, so this is why the mitochondria is called the mighty mitochondria. All right, so on your paper, draw your mitochondria. Draw it as large as you can. I can't draw it very large because of the screen size. But on the inside of the mitochondria is an inner folded membrane, okay? Now this is your cristae, and cristae is the actual membrane, so it's like a double layer, and this is the inner layer, and it's folded. And if we were actually to look at it really close, it's going to be lots and lots of folds, because the more folds equals more area to complete. Step 3 is your electron transport chain, okay? So if you have a lot more space to do step 3, if you remember from the first video, step 3 is where you get the most energy. So it just gives you a lot more surface area to get a lot more energy done. People who have diseases where the cristae is there's not a lot of it, they tend to be very tired. It's called mitochondrial disorder, and it's because they just don't have a lot of surface area to finish that final step, okay? So I'm going to briefly show you where each step happens, and then I'm going to break down each step for you. So step 1 happens outside of the mitochondria. So we are inside of a cell right now, and there are lots and lots of mitochondria. But the first step is going to happen in that area outside of the mitochondria, and that fluid that surrounds that is called the cytosol. All right, and step 1 is called glycolysis. And glycolysis is where, we'll talk about it a little bit further, but the glucose gets lysed or split. Okay, step 2 is going to happen inside the matrix, right? And that's the inside of the mitochondria. And step 2 is called Krebs cycle. So that is where you will have step 2 occurring. And then step 3, your electron transport chain, it happens right there in the inner cristae. Okay, so this is step 3, and this is going to be your electron transport chain. So 1, 2, 3, we go outside the mitochondria, we get into the matrix, we move into the cristae, and then it's over. Okay, so now glycolysis does not have another name, and electron transport chain can be called electron transport system, but very similar. Krebs cycle is also known as the citric, wow, not spelled right, citric acid cycle. Okay, so, and it's because it's going to make another acid there, and so just remember that if they talk about citric acid cycle or Krebs cycle, it's literally the same thing. Okay, so we're going to focus a little more on glycolysis. So I'm going to make my mitochondria very tiny because I want to talk about what's happening out here. Okay, so outside in the cytosol, we have a sugar molecule, and the molecule is called glucose. All right, so we have our cell, and you're going to eat food. Okay, so I'm going to let you eat an apple. Okay, and you're going to be happy because you're eating an apple. Apple is full of sugar. It's going to go into your mouth. It's going to go through your digestive tract. Okay, so it'll be stomach, small intestines. So I'll do small intestines. And from the small intestines, it's going to diffuse into your blood. And so flowing all throughout your blood, all throughout your body, all around. Okay, and it only takes a couple minutes for the blood to flow all around your body. The blood is going to come near your cells, all lined along there, and it's going to be delivering all kinds of things, but in it right now, because you just ate, was glucose. Now, glucose wants to get into the cell, but it cannot diffuse in because it's too large, so it actually has to pass through its own channel, okay? And so it does facilitated. Okay, so it diffuses in because it goes from high concentration in your blood to low concentration in the cell. Cells that have a lot of sugar don't bring in any more sugar. Okay, so this is how it knows to come in or not, and it has its own little channel that it can pass through. So let's say this cell needs some energy, so the glucose is going to diffuse in, and it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 carbons. And then it's going to have oxygen attached, and it does not look like this, so it's formatted in a different way. And then so C6, and then O6, and then there's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Not in this shape, okay? This is just for you to see all the C6, H12O6, okay? That is too large, okay? So it's too big to move in, okay? Can't get in. All right, so glycolysis has to occur. And what happens in glycolysis is the sugar is basically broken in half. Okay, so now instead of this big molecule, you have one that has 3 carbons and one that has 3 carbons, and then it'll take its 3 oxygens with it, and then it'll take its as well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so the new molecule is a C3H6O3. So you have 2 of them. If you do the math and you add them together, you'll get back to a C6H12O6. So because it is broken in half, it's no longer called glucose, all right? They're called pyruvate, okay? So this is a pyruvate and this is a pyruvate. So when you break a sugar in half, you get 2 pyruvates. I always say 2 pieces of pie. They're also called pyruvic acid, okay? Because they have a lot of hydrogen on them. So that's the first thing that happens. Snap it in half, okay? When you snap it in half, releases ATP. Okay, so that breaking of that bond releases energy, and it actually releases 4. Okay, but the breaking uses 2 ATP. Okay, so when it's all said and done, you end up with 2 ATP out of the deal. So you snap it in half, you get 2 pyruvates, which are now small enough to move into the mitochondria. You get a little bit of ATP, so you get 2 out of the deal, and you get this new molecule, okay? And we're going to talk about it in a minute, and I'm going to draw it in green so that you can follow it throughout what's going on, all right? But I'm going to tell you that this molecule is going to end up going to step 3, okay? And it's called NADH, okay? Now, from photosynthesis, we're going to flash back. Photosynthesis had a very, very, very similar molecule, but it wasn't called NADH. It was called, let me see if I can find my picture. It was NADPH. All right, so very similar structure, and if you remember, NADPH carried hydrogen from the light reaction to the dark reaction. So very, very similar circumstances here. NADH is going to be carrying hydrogen, and it's going to deliver hydrogen to step 3. Okay, so it's going to deliver it here to the cristae. All right, so that is what happens in glycolysis. So the breakdown is step 1, make sure you can see that, okay. We have glycolysis. All right, so this is break sugar. So here are the products. You get 2 pyruvates, which are C3H6O3. You get 2 ATP, and you get 2 NADH, okay? So that is what happens during glycolysis. All right, now step 2 happens. And step 2 is called Krebs cycle or citric acid cycle. Okay, so now glycolysis was occurring in the cytosol. Krebs cycle is now going to happen in the mitochondrial matrix. I'm going to draw a little bit bigger mitochondria so that you can see what happens in Krebs cycle. Alright, so now we're inside. I'll draw the cristae. What's going to happen inside. Okay, so now we've broken our sugar in half outside, and now that C3H6O3 can move in. There's 2 of them, okay? So each one of them moves in. And for each one, there is 1 cycle of the Krebs cycle. So this is 1 turn of the cycle. And then this is also 1 turn of the cycle. All right, so for every single sugar molecule, Krebs cycle turns twice because the 1 sugar gets snapped into 2 pyruvates and they go into Krebs cycle. All right, a lot of stuff is going on in Krebs cycle, but a lot of it you don't need to know yet. So I'm only going to tell you what you need to know. All right, so what's happening here is, once again, this hydrogen, just like in photosynthesis, this is what the mitochondria needs. Hydrogen is just so full of energy, okay? So they're trying to rip, in this cycle, the hydrogen away from these pyruvates. So if you rip hydrogen away, so this is take hydrogen, okay? What are you left with? You're left with carbons and oxygens, okay? And so what happens is when that hydrogen gets ripped away, there's this waste product that gets made. And these carbons and oxygens combine together and make carbon dioxide. So every time it turns, you don't need to know the numbers yet. It doesn't matter how much gets made to you. But that's carbon dioxide. So your actual carbon dioxide that you end up exhaling literally came from the food you ate. So it got ripped apart from the food you ate. And this is why if you exercise a lot, the more you exhale, the more calories you're burning, because your body's taking that food you ate, breaking it down to get that hydrogen out of it, and you are actually exhaling particles of the food. So you lose those pieces and parts. So the more running, the more aerobic respiration that you do, where you're breathing a lot, you're going to exhale a lot of your food, and you're going to get rid of it, and you're going to burn it off. And that's where exercise burns off those excess calories. All right, so when I pull the hydrogens off of this pyruvate, I get 6 here, and then when I pull it off of this pyruvate, I get 6. So in the total, I get 12 hydrogens, which are awesome. That's what I want. And then all of this is my waste product, okay? Now, in the breaking of the bonds, you get a little bit of ATP. You get 2 more, okay? So now in total, we have 4 ATP. So I'm going to add to my list real quick for Krebs cycle, all right? So remove the hydrogens, sometimes they write them as H plus, from the C3H6O3s, okay? And release CO2, because we don't need it anymore. And then the hydrogen is carried to step 3, which is your electron transport channel, by 2 carrier molecules. One of them is NADH, and the other one is FAD, and he is H2. So he can actually carry 2 hydrogens, and NADH can carry 1. So coming away from Krebs cycle, you're going to have FADH2, and he's going to take and he's going to deliver his 2 hydrogens, and then he'll come back to Krebs cycle as FAD to pick up more. All right, so NADH does the same thing. He goes over here, drops off his hydrogen, and then once he drops it off, he will return to Krebs cycle as plain old NAD, and he'll pick up more. And so all day long, he just keeps going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And he delivers, picks up more, delivers, picks up more, delivers, picks up more, okay? So FADH2 and NADH are called carrier molecules, and they're carrying all that hydrogen. So after all of this, because that's literally just one glucose molecule, so there's billions and trillions of them. Inside of the cristae, we start getting a high concentration of hydrogen molecules, okay? And hydrogen molecules are super energized. We saw this happening in photosynthesis in the photosystem, and the hydrogens would build up and then they would diffuse out, and when they would move out, they would create ATP. Okay, so we're going to talk about this last step right here. I'm just going to extend the paper. Okay, so hydrogen right here builds up, builds up, builds up. All right, and it's going to naturally diffuse out. Okay, and this hydrogen, you can call it hyperhydrogen. It will create a lot of energy. And he can't just like go in and out normally. He's going to zigzag. Okay, so he's going to move in and out of the cristae membrane. ATP as he does this. All right, so in and out, all on the inside and everything, and then eventually he diffuses out, okay? One single glucose, so the C6H12O6 that gets split into 2 pyruvates, and they go in here and cycle around, and then everybody ends up dumping off all of their hydrogen here in the cristae. For every 1 single glucose, 32 ATP get made in this last step, okay? And this last step is called your electron transport chain. So 32 is a lot. So this is where we get our most money, our biggest return on our investment. Okay, so we got step 1, glycolysis, step 2, Krebs cycle, and now we have the most important one, which is step 3, and that is your electron transport chain, okay? And what happens here is hydrogen levels are so high that hydrogen diffuses in and out of the cristae membrane, and then causing ADP to get energized into ATP. So 1 glucose will give us 32 ATP at this level, okay? So now we are looking at step 1 gave us 2, step 2 gave us 2, but step 3 gave us 32 ATP. And that's going to give us 36 ATP total from the aerobic respiration. All right, now the one molecule I have not even talked about at all is oxygen, okay? So your formula for cellular respiration is glucose, so C6H12O6, which is right here. Glucose comes in here. And then plus oxygen, which it hasn't been talked about yet. And it's going to give us carbon dioxide. We got that. It's going to give us ATP, which is energy. We got that. And then it's going to give us water. Not talked about yet. All right? So the two molecules that I haven't said anything about are about to come up. Okay? So here's where oxygen is so important and why you breathe it in. All right, right here on this last step, okay? This hydrogen is diffusing into the cytosol. You should remember by now that high levels of hydrogen equal acids, okay? You should also remember that acids can denature enzymes. So if you have a high level of acid building up inside your cell, you're going to denature a lot of your enzymes, and then that's not going to be good. You're going to die, the cell could die, a lot of things could happen. So something has to neutralize or deal with this high level of hydrogen buildup. And this is, ladies and gentlemen, why you breathe in oxygen, okay? So oxygen is very important because it has an affinity for hydrogen. And so every time you breathe in oxygen, the oxygen, so here's your cell membrane, can diffuse straight through because it's small and it's nonpolar. All right, so you can go straight through your cell membrane, thank goodness, all right? And it's going to diffuse in. And the cool thing about oxygen is, this is how I like to draw oxygen in this stage. So I draw him, and he's got a little cape on, and he's got little legs, and he's flying in, okay, as a superhero to save the day. Well, I'll even put a little mask on him so he can be, okay. Let's give him a red cape. All right, so this is super oxygen. As it may be. The reason is he can hold on hydrogens at once. So as you breathe it in and he diffuses into your cell, he comes in and he grabs these two superacidic hydrogens and he hangs on to them. And if you notice, now he's not oxygen and these aren't dangerous hydrogens. They have become H2O. 2 hydrogens, 1 oxygen, you get water. And so now this very dangerous acidic hydrogen has become a very safe, easy to deal with molecule, water. So sometimes it stays in the cytosol and keeps it liquidy. Sometimes it can diffuse out. So H2O can leave out. Its little portals that it leaves out of are called aquaporins. Okay, so sometimes some of the liquid in your blood is coming from this water that's been created by the oxygen coming in and grabbing these dangerous hydrogens. All right, so now there we've addressed where our oxygen, its job, and its role is to come in and save the day, grab these hydrogens. Now, if you were to hold your breath and not have any oxygen in your body, your hydrogen levels would build up to the point that your cells would start dying. And so this is what suffocation is. And so you die because all of the acid build up inside the cell and because no oxygen is coming in. Now, if your body recognizes that you're having an issue and you're not bringing enough oxygen in, it'll cause you to pass out. And when it does, then all of your activities slow down. And so then your body can start breathing deeply, bringing in a lot more oxygen and helping your body recover from this. All right, so those are your 3 main steps, your 3 only steps of aerobic cellular respiration. And the reason it's aerobic because oxygen comes in that final step, saves the day, grabs that hydrogen and turns it into water. All right, so aerobic means with oxygen, and my next short little video will be anaerobic.